It's my both an honor and a pleasure for me to introduce our next speaker, Congressman Jim Langevin, who represents the 2nd Congressional District in Rhode Island. Like our earlier congressional speaker, Congressman Lamborn, Congressman Langevin has been at the forefront of the thinking on Capitol Hill about the role and the promise of directed energy. In fact, you could certainly make a strong argument that Congressman Langevin has been the forefront of a lot of thinking about where the next big thing is coming from. Not only is he on the House Armed Services Committee, he is the ranking member of the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee. He also serves as the ranking member on the Homeland Security Committee in Congress. He is co-chair, along with Congressman Lamborn, of the Directed Energy Caucus, and he's co-founder of the Cybersecurity Caucus, something that's, I think, managed to creep its way into the news recently. So we have, again, the good fortune of having a forward thinker, a member of Congress who has taken a particular interest in directed energy, and we look forward to hearing your views, Congressman. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Jim Langevin.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I enjoyed hearing from Secretary Mabus and what he had to say. He's a great Secretary of the Navy, and again, it's a privilege to be with him and following him. But I want to thank you all for the invitation to join you at this very important conference on a subject that's really near and dear to my heart. And I know that, as Andrew mentioned, my colleague Doug Lamborn spoke earlier. He's my partner in crime on these issues, and I appreciate his bipartisan support on directed energy, and among many other things. So before I begin, I don't want you to be distracted by the chair. Everybody's always wondering, how is he balancing on 2 wheels? And I know you're all technology people. You probably have already figured it out. Intense concentration. So. Gyroscope's just there for backup. But anyway, it really is a pleasure to be with all of you here today. Talk about the promise of directed energy and the hurdles that we need to clear before we can truly realize its potential. And there are many, but there are any number of notables here that I know can talk about and speak with authority on what these capabilities are and what they could mean for the future of our military. And I know many have already spoken about many of the real specifics of the types of technology, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But I just want to drive home what I'm sure Mr. Lamborn spoke to earlier, which is that Congress stands ready to support where we can and lead where we must in order to ensure that the right capabilities are available to the men and women of our in the military, both of the present and of the future. So after decades of promise and very often frustration, I firmly believe that we're at a place now where there are real directed energy capabilities that can be harvested in the near term. So I'd just like to offer my thoughts, if I could, on what the view is like from Capitol Hill right now, and then I'd welcome some comments and as well as questions and even pushback if you want to challenge those observations. So I'm not here just to talk about the congressional perspective, but also to bring back your perspective, of course, and your expertise to better inform those of us on the Hill that are charged with policy making in the Congress. So right now on Capitol Hill, I guess it would be fair to characterize the support of directed energy programs as mixed. But I would say it's getting stronger as the technologies start to mature. And that's not due, of course, to a lack of effort, though, that we're not where I'd like us to be. It's not the easiest thing in the world to explain what the systems are and how they create effects. Even the most basic measurements of capability take a decent amount of explaining, and sometimes even, heaven forbid, some physics that are involved. But to members of Congress and staff presented with a briefing or a meeting, it takes time and patience to wrap your head around the basics of the technology, let alone to game out what the capabilities could mean to future warfighting, and the second or third order effects that those capabilities are on tactics, on strategy, on doctrine, and on the rest of the defense establishment, and that's before you factor in, of course, the decades of directed energy being oversold and under-realized. And that's probably our biggest enemy or challenge in this realm. I still remember back in March of 1983 when President Reagan gave his famous Star Wars speech. I was a college student at the time, and I have to admit that I was one of those people who were captured by the promise of directed energy and the capabilities that provided in terms of protecting our country from missile defense. And missile threats and such. So that promise was never fully realized, but President Reagan did what any good president should do, and that's set out a bold vision and challenge the nation to realize that vision. So I think that, again, many people were discouraged because there were millions of dollars that were spent, and we never really quite fully realized that vision. But I think we're further along, and we're at a place where the technology is really showing incredible promise and maturity, and I think in the very near term we're going to see the capabilities fully realized, and I think you'll see a lot of successes, and I think they'll prove themselves. Facts speak for themselves, and the capabilities really speak for themselves. So I think there are a lot of parallels, of course, here to another one of my favorite topics, and that's cybersecurity that Andrew mentioned earlier. So when I first started working on cyber policy back in 2007 as the chairman of the subcommittee on Homeland Security that had jurisdiction over these issues, I got a lot of funny looks, and people thought I was a bit of an alarmist. I don't think they think that anymore. And obviously the situation is far different, though I wish it were for better reasons. But just as with cyber, it will take time and continued thoughtful engagement to develop a better understanding of the full spectrum of directed energy capabilities among a congressional audience. The good news is that there's a strong core of members who have shown that they're willing to take the time and the effort to dive in. And you think of all the thousands of issues that members of Congress are confronted with every day, every year, and it's hard to get everyone focused on important areas all at the same time. But I'm fortunate that I have a guy like Doug Lamborn, who's my co-chair of the Directed Energy Caucus, and other members of the caucus, folks like Senator Heinrich, former colleague on the House side, went over to the dark side, now in the Senate. But Senator Heinrich, who may, as I said, be on the wrong side of the Capitol, but but he's on the right side of the issue. So the advocacy is core there. We have again several other members on both Democratic and Republican side who are party to the effort. But it will take sustained effort to build awareness and support to a level that matches the potential of the technology. And I have to say that's hard work, but it's desperately needed. And I think we're moving in a very good direction. So what would greatly assist with this process, of course, is stronger coordinations of programs and efforts. Right now, in order to get a coherent idea on the breadth of directed energy work, a responsible member needs to talk to the Army, talk to the Navy, take a break from the Pentagon and talk about depths, go back and talk to the Air Force, talk to the Marines, read some reports, and from the think tank world, and talk to the HEL, JTO, or talk to DARPA, get briefings, talk to major contractors about their IRAD, swing by the national labs, and probably get an intel update or two before they can really understand what's going on. So you can understand that there's a lot of moving parts there, and trying to get members to focus on it would be sometimes our greatest challenge. They might even want to talk to the electronic warfare community, the cyber community, the BMD community, and the air defense community. It's a lot of work, and that's fine. We don't need to be experts in everything, and that's why, of course, we have all of you, and you certainly can assist us in that effort. But greater coordination among these disparate parts at least enough to provide confidence that we're avoiding duplication of effort, that we're spending dollars wisely, and for a given application would, I think, be a really positive step. So at one level, these disparate programs and opportunities are a good sign. There are lots of promising leads and technologies, but without greater coherence or much greater funding, because we risk diluting effort and resources to the point where we choke the life out of some really promising programs. So industry, I know, has stepped up in a big way with IRAD dollars, which is important, but there has to be a programmatic light at the end of the tunnel. And I've been pushing for that in order for companies to feel comfortable continuing to invest in the precious R&D dollars that are necessary to maintain their intellectual capability. So then perhaps even the most important thing that we can do to advance the state of these technologies, of course, is getting them into the field, which is something that I've been pushing for. Now, we know that they will not be perfect. That's okay. They may fail. They may end up not performing as expected or otherwise not be what we all imagine them to be. But as I said, that's okay. The first airplane wasn't an F-22. The first warship was not a Zumwalt. And the first tank wasn't an Abrams. So in many cases, systems weren't even intended to perform in the roles and missions that we now take for granted. Doctrine will adjust and change as new and innovative uses for the systems are found. That's one thing that I understand right now that's coming out of the Ponce deployment. Our soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen will figure out ways to realize potential that we never even knew probably existed. But in order for that to happen, we need to get the systems out there. So our job then is to make sure that those goals are easier to realize, that we need to make sure that we aren't just building science projects, waiting for the silver bullet that will, by definition, never get there, since we're talking about directed energy weapons. But there are a lot of important research. There's a lot of important research out there, and it's those investments that have put us in the position that we're in today. They need to be protected, but we can't wait for the perfect, and we can't squeeze out the drive towards an operational capability. Let's harvest the low-hanging fruit. Let's take a few risks and adjust from there. We know that the status quo of expensive missile interceptors, the multi-mission ships that end up barely able to do more than self-defense, places us squarely on the wrong side of the cost equation, unable to persist in the battlegrounds of the future. And in many ways, those battlegrounds are here today. We know the types of technologies that our enemies or adversaries are investing in. We know that they hold our very expensive weapon systems at risk, especially when you're talking about ship defense. They've got the easy part of our enemies and adversaries have the easy part of the job, since the missiles that could threaten our troops or the homeland or our fleet or our capabilities, they're relatively low-end technologies that they can throw at us that are very inexpensive versus the type of technologies that we need to use to intercept those threats. So obviously, directed energy helped to shift and rebalance that cost equation. So we need to be. We also need to be wargaming what these capabilities could be, enable us as far as operational concepts. What is the doctrine for a laser-armed DDG or LCS, or for a capability like CHAMP? When do we use energy weapons versus traditional interceptors? What do surface action group tactics look like if you have a 30 kilowatt weapon or a 150 kilowatt system? Generating that doctrinal pull for capabilities rather than capability for capability's sake is something that, from the congressional side, would be very, very helpful and potentially lead to exciting new warfighting concepts. So what's less exciting, of course, is trying to think about what a world looks like when these capabilities are proliferated. So we can't assume that that we'll get there wherever there is before any potential adversaries. You can be sure that they, of course, are watching us, that they're seeing what moves that we're making, and that they're able to make the same calculations about how transformative directed energy will be, and we obviously need to be thinking down those routes as well. So, with that, let me just pause there. I really appreciate the efforts of CSBA and Booz Allen to get all of us together today to bring some energy and coherence, or even some laser focus, if you will, to these issues. I appreciate the work that all of you are doing, the interest that you have in these things. I believe strongly in the promise of these technologies, and I certainly look forward to working with all of you to achieve the promise of directed energy. And my door is always open, and I certainly hope that you'll feel free to reach out to me, to my office, to my staff, to keep the dialogue going. And with that, I thank you for your work, and I'm eager to take some questions. Thank you.
Friedberg, Breaking Defense. Just to pull the string on your remarks about just how complex it is for, a regular member who's not, the co-chair of a caucus to really put his or her hands around all the complexities. What can the services, what can OSD do to make their case for energy better on the Hill, to overcome some of that residual skepticism, and to really, convey in congressperson-friendly terms, what's really going on, what potential is?
Yeah, so I would say certainly Hill visits are important, and just bringing up a couple of points of where we're having successes would be helpful. We have member visits all the time by members of our military. I know it takes effort to come up to the Hill to meet with staff, meet with members, but keeping us up to date, and especially members that aren't familiar with directed energy, is helpful. Never underestimate how important those visits can be. Again, it helps us to focus on the things that are important to men and women of the armed services, and I'm always honored when I have those visits and try to make time for them whenever possible. So, and obviously highlighting the successes that we might be having in the field. Whenever I'm talking about it, I frequently point to the work that the Navy's doing on directed energy, and we've got the USS Ponce in the field that is actually experimenting with the capability. So not only is it an R&D platform, but it's something that's operational.
Yes, Karina Robinson, a U.S. Army veteran and also a former congressional candidate. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
What I'd ask is, back in 1971, perhaps 73% of the members on the Hill were veterans. And now that is, of course, greatly reduced. But you mentioned earlier in your comments how it's a mixed kind of support you have there on the Hill. Do you think if we had more folks that served in the military, that were elected officials, that perhaps concepts like directed energy would be better supported?
Yeah, good question. We don't have as many, as I understand, members who have served in the armed forces as had been the case in years past. But I'm not sure that that's the only thing that would be the thing that would push directed energy. We all have a deep appreciation for the men and women who serve, and we know that we have the finest military on the face of the planet because of the men and women who wear the uniform, but also because we have these amazing companies and people who go to work every day building extraordinary capabilities. And so it's a partnership. And so I think that the thing that helps the most is talking about capabilities and how it can better provide capabilities to our forces, both in whether it's offensive or defensive operations that are going to keep them safe, keep our men and women secure, and help them to be most effective at the job that they are doing. And so I don't know that enough of my colleagues have enough of an appreciation for what our adversaries are doing and using both asymmetric threats or low-cost technologies that are going to hold our forces at risk, and how do we counter that? Now, some of them, obviously, we have very advanced capabilities in use of kinetic weapons, kinetic defenses that are helping with things like missile defense. We've made great technology, great leaps forward in those areas. You look at what Israel has done with Iron Dome and David Sling and various other capabilities. So we know that these capabilities work in an operational setting, and yet we also recognize that we're not going to be able to sufficiently defend against the type of raid sizes that our adversaries can throw at us. When you're talking about, just for example, Iran developing and North Korea developing the short, medium, and long-range missile capabilities. We don't have enough missile interceptors to intercept everything that they potentially could throw at us in a conflict situation. So we are going to have to rely on other types of technologies that are lower cost but highly effective, like directed energy, to be able to provide those defenses.
Congressman James Drew from Flight Global. Congressman Richard Nugent and also congressmen like yourself have been instrumental in pushing the CHAMP weapon system that the Air Force Research Laboratory has been working on and trying to get that out into the field as quickly as possible, like the Navy did with their laser weapon system.
Yes.
If services don't start fielding these weapons and putting them in the hands of the warfighter, could you see them losing research and development dollars through congressional frustration if these things don't actually start showing results in the field?
It certainly is possible. That's one of the things that I do worry about. And look, there's always a kind of it's a conundrum. I know that, and I think that's why I really like sitting on the subcommittee on emerging threats that I do, since it oversees most of our R&D efforts. You know, the scientists, the researchers want to keep the stuff in the labs, right? And they'll research it to death in many cases. And so we have to be, constantly pushing when it's ready to get out of the labs and get fielded, that we're ready to do that. There's a path forward on that. Of course, there's the other side. One of the big things is inertia. With people like to keep doing what we're doing because that's the way we've always done it. And certainly I know that there are certainly those within the Pentagon that they like relying on the old the weapon system that they're comfortable with, the capabilities that they're comfortable with because they know they work. And so sometimes it takes that push to get these new operational capabilities kind of taken on and mainstreamed. And we all know what happened with UAVs, and when they first came online, there was a big resistance within the traditional Air Force, as I understand it, to adopt a lot of these technologies. But now we realize that they're indispensable. So there's got to be it's got to be kind of both sides. The R&D has to be mature enough, but getting a program of record, I think, is what gives confidence both to industry to keep investing in these areas, and also to the warfighter that we're serious about getting these things fielded.
One more question.
Mark Holliday, Booz Allen. So what international collaborations are you pursuing in the Congress?
Yeah, so the big one, of course, is our R&D with the Israelis, but we certainly, there are a number of our foreign partners that we collaborate with, but I'd say the Israelis are probably the biggest one right now, and perhaps industry might be in a better position even to answer that question. But wherever possible, I support collaborative efforts among our closest allies and partners. And wherever we can leverage this technology, we're all going to benefit from it. So this isn't just it really shouldn't be just a U.S. investment or a U.S. Capability that we're going to benefit from. It's something that would benefit our international partners as well. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Congressman Langevin for a very insightful presentation. Thank you.